All right. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Middle East Forum's weekly podcast series. My name is Anaf Kalam, and I will be moderating today's discussion. We are pleased to be joined today by Dr. Amira Halperin, who is a professor on foreign policy and security and an international commentator, and she joins us this week to discuss the topic of navigating UK college campuses in a post-October 7th world, as well as sharing a personal story about something that happened to her that really drives this point home. And with that, I will turn the discussion over to Dr. Amira Halperin.
Thank you very much, Naf, for inviting me. I'm happy to be here, and thank you very much for the audience with everybody who are participating today. So we start with the personal story, which is a reflection of the situation of radicalization on UK campuses after October 7th, but also before October 7th. When Hamas carried out these terrorist attacks on October 7th, the largest terrorist attack actually in Israel's history, I was working as an assistant professor in media and communications at Coventry University in the UK. And immediately after the massacre happened, the vice chancellor of the university informed us that he would definitely support all members of staff and students, regardless to their ethnicity or without any racial bias, without anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and so on and so forth. But 2.5 weeks after he sent actually this letter, a radical student I was teaching was threatening me more than once. And this wasn't accidental. The student was a member of groups that are very radical and support Hamas. He participated in demonstrations. He threatened one of the former MPs in the UK before he threatened me and was blocked by him on social media. But the university decided not to investigate, though I reported under prevent. Now, the topic of under prevent is one of the main topics that are related to the issue of counterterrorism in the UK and on UK campuses. But when we talk about counterterrorism, we have to bear in mind that what is happening in campuses is a reflection of the situation in societies in Europe in large and in particular in the UK, which means that it's not only on campuses, but the terrorism threat is very much evident outside of campuses as well. As I said, I filed a complaint under prevent, and I will explain what does it mean for the benefit of the participants that are not currently residing in the UK. So under the UK's Counterterrorism and Security Act 2015, universities have a legal duty to have a due regard to the need to prevent people from being drawn into terrorism. And even though that I reported under prevent, the university didn't investigate the student and he continued his studies. And since I researched terrorism in the UK as a journalist, and afterwards as an academic for many years, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I'm not protected. I knew that Israelis are not safe on campus, and I knew that there is a serious threat on campus, not only by these students, but by other students as well. So if I would summarize this under prevent strategy, I would say that UK campuses have been bound by this prevent duty since 2015 as a core component of UK counter-terrorism strategy. Now, the background for this is that between 2009 to 2014, there were cases of radicalized foreign fighters who had studies in the UK and students that committed terrorist-related offenses. There were universities where few students have been radicalized by ISIS, for example, and carried out attacks. For example, one of them is University of Westminster. So the implementation basically of the prevent duty was very, very important. The problem is that managements of universities were reluctant to act according to this prevent duty because pro-Palestine activists were challenging this even before October 7th. They were saying that the university is basically tracking them in prayer rooms and chattering, shredding their Quran books and so on and so forth, and were very vocal about their liberation and were really vocal about the government's role in stop discriminating them on the background of terrorism offenses. And that's why I think that universities didn't take action really in order to investigate radicalization on campuses. The problem was that after the students threatened me and the university didn't investigate, which is very serious, of course, the climate at the university became gradually even more hostile. There were students and professors were calling for jihad. Institutional links with universities that support terrorism in Gaza and the West Bank with the university have been intensified, and there was this relentless activism to boycott Israeli universities and scholars. It was a feeling of one against the many others, because we as Israeli professors are in the minority at the university, basically. One of the main problems was also a problem of freedom of speech, because I was not allowed to talk, for example, to the media as an expert, whereas people that were pro-Palestine, where I worked, for example, or Palestinian scholars that talked about the fact that Israel committed genocide and talked about Israel as the state that to be blamed in October 7th and so on and so forth, they were the people that were allowed to talk, basically. So, for example, there was one professor at the university, his name was Marwan Dawish, and he was the one that really mostly talked about, the genocide, as he called it, the occupation, and all the other reasons that he gave in order for people to feel that Israel is to be blamed. Now, if we'll zoom out from the university case, I would like to describe to you the situation now in the UK and to talk in more details also based on the report that I wrote about radicalization on UK campuses. So Hamas is included in the list of the most recent proscribed terrorist organizations in the UK. In April 2025, Hamas leader Musa Abu Marzouk, he instructed a British law firm to fight against the decision of the UK government to designate Hamas. So the claim was that Hamas movement, as they call it, do not pose a threat to the British society and do not pose a threat to Britain as a whole. And as I said, we see that this situation where there is increase in terrorism threat after October 7th and increase in online radicalization, and actually there is now a legal bid to remove Hamas from the list of terrorist organizations. 18 student bodies joined the legal bid and now support this legal bid to remove Hamas from the UK terrorist list. It's not only these 18 universities. There are other universities that support this bid, but they are doing separate campaigns. Now I would like to go further and to dive into really all the details that would explain why the situation of radicalization on campuses is actually posing a risk, in contrast, of course, to the claim of this law firm and Hamas saying that Hamas is not posing a threat in the UK. A week after the massacre, 790 scholars and practitioners from all over Europe and the US signed on a statement titled "Scholars Warn of Potential Genocide in Gaza." This statement refers only once to Hamas, calling them fighters, not terrorists. There is no reference to the massacre at all. On top of this, so many universities from across Europe and the US that are signatories on these statements. There are two signatories that are affiliated with Al-Haq. Al-Haq is a humanitarian organization that has been declared as a terrorist organization by Israel. Al-Haq also expressed support in October 7th. In addition to the signatories of Al-Haq, there are 5 scholars that are affiliated with Birzeit University in the West Bank. Birzeit University is known for its link with terrorism. We know that there was a suit against Harvard University, for example, where they are citing the fact that in Birzeit there is discrimination, promoting discrimination against Jews, but even more so, there are people that are involved in terrorism and terrorists that studied at the university, and buildings and events are being named after terrorists at the university. So when we see this statement, we understand that the problem of these institutional links didn't start after October 7th, but it started way before October 7th, when there were collaborations and delegations between these two universities. There were other cases as well. For example, University of Applied Sciences in Gaza has memorandum of understanding with Coventry University. Israel, IDF destroyed this university. The president of the university is now included in the list of the shaheeds of the Palestinians after October 7th. So I don't have much time to continue the discussion about all of the cases that we see that explain to us and demonstrate radicalization on campuses, but there are many more details that I would be happy to share with you when we have the Q&A session or in later discussions, where I can elaborate further and explain how so many practitioners and scholars are signing on this. I would just, Anav, do I have 1 minute?
Yes, of course. If you go a little long, that's totally fine.
So I will just, before I summarize, I would like to give you a small example of the support of terrorism on the university, for example, the Coventry University that I worked. So, for example, one of the professors that worked there, after Birzeit posted this support protest against Israel, so this vocal protest of the genocide by Israel, he reposted this, and there is also this right to education campaign where basically the pro-Palestine movement blame the Israeli for destroying the universities, calling it idiocy. This is the term that they are using. When I was meeting with members of parliament in the UK, and I have been asked to advise them about terrorism and counterterrorism, I summarized it briefly by looking at 3 levels of counterterrorism, which in my opinion are the most, and based on evidence, are the most important one. One is the need to cut funding to universities that allow glorification of terrorism and threat on students and staff. And in many universities, including this university that I worked, there were cases of glorification of terrorism that were not taken care of. Second is to revoke visas of radical students. We see the challenge of the UK government, where there are students that have been radicalized, but the government failed to revoke the visas. And third is also the enforcement of, and I wrote it down because this is very important, the safeguarding policy, the Freedom of Speech Act, the bullying and harassment policy, dignity and respect policy, and of course the equality, diversity, and inclusion policy. And in this regard, I want also to say that Coventry University, in my case, failed me twice. First, because I'm an Israeli professor, but second, because I'm also British.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your insights, as well as giving us a look into that personal story that exemplifies exactly the problem here. Now, we have a number of audience questions here. I'm going to start from one. I'm going to start with one from Jill Kappen, who asks, Are there particular non-Jewish professors or even Arab professors who are outspoken against the jihadist tide, and what is their experience?
I didn't come across professors who are not Jewish, who supported the Jewish community or the Israeli community, if this is the question. I'm sure that they are. I think that there are also universities that are categorized according to different levels. So, for example, Coventry University is a certain university where there were totally no support. I mean, if we look at the scale, as there are other universities in the UK, maybe where there is more support. Generally speaking, I didn't see many professors that are supporting. But of course, Gil, thank you for the question. And if someone has more insight about looking at the other side or more positive side, I would be very much glad to hear.
All right, thank you. Now, I'm going to go to another question here. Carrie Hillebrand asks, are there Jewish organizations in the UK mounting legal challenges to the inaction at the universities? Do they offer legal resources in defense of Jewish and Israeli students caught up in campus anti-Semitism?
So I can tell you from my perspective as a professor, not as a student, though I see it as one body, of course, because I think that the solution must include all of us as an academic community. But I think that this question is really highlighting and shining a light on the problem, on the prominent problem, where not only that we are a minority here as Israeli professor, I can tell you that there are not many Israeli professors like me that can't work in academia here. I lost my job there because of this radical extremist. And unfortunately, unlike the US, because I have many professors and colleagues in the US, and I know that in the US there is a designated law firm that is helping them. Here we don't have something similar. Of course, we have few organizations like CAA and the UK Lawyers for Israel, but their support is not on the scale that we actually need in order to combat and fight against this. And that's why also I would like to use this platform to call for support and to collaborate with people from around the world and to see how we can tackle these problems.
Absolutely. Now, something you kind of brought up and you touched on is, well, first of all, your mistreatment by the university, which, you were a Israeli Jewish professor. What do you think explains the double standard when you actually have professors, not just in the UK, but all over the Western world, who are able to use their platforms as professors to basically support groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, Hezbollah, you name it? Why is it that they get away with basically impunity under the guise of academic freedom, whereas they decided to kind of drop the hammer on you and other Israeli Jews?
In my opinion, it's like I said, it's the fact of being a minority. If we look at one university, this university as an example, so we have many students that are Palestinians or pro-Palestinians, and we have many professors that are Palestinian or pro-Palestinians, and we have one Israeli professor, right? So if we look at generate, for example, income, university is a business. So if we look at income and resources and who would provide more income to the university, this is one issue that they look at. For example, the BDS movement and the links with the Middle East hub, for example, at this university and other universities they are going back. I mean, it started many years ago, and this is basically the feeling that we are in a minority, that our voice doesn't matter, and we are the underdog.
Thank you. Now, something you touched on just there, good segue into two questions from the audience, which I'm going to kind of put together here. Number one, it comes from Mehrdad Komsari, who asks, who in your mind is financing these various legal bids to remove Hamas from the terror list? Are they local NGOs or Arab businesses and governments? And then the second question to kind of tag on to the point of where the money comes from. Stephen asks, does the money behind getting more and more of these useful idiots come from Qatar?
So, for example, Birzeit University, they receive funding from a charity in Qatar. And Birzeit University, as I said, linked with more than 50 institutions in Europe, including the UK, through Erasmus program. And they have these links, as we said, in Harvard, they finger on the problem and they, I don't know if we can say definitely solve the problem, but I can say 100% that here in Europe, the institutional links with Birzeit still exist with funding of Qatar. The lawyer that is leading the legal bid that has been instructed by Musa Abu Mazouk, his name is Fahad Ansar. And Fahad Ansar is based in the UK. He's a lawyer. He's funded by foreign actors. He used to work as a just law firm. He used to run a law firm, which was a regular law firm. Now he has changed the law firm. He even changed the name of the law firm that it would fit to the battle from the river to the sea. So he even changed it. And the UK Foreign Office here say that he's not a lawyer, but rather a political activist. And I will not go into of course, his funding now, but I agree that there are funding from foreign funding that coming here into the UK and leads to these problems. There was one case that I've been interviewed on in Israeli media where I've been invited by the Dean of University of Westminster in London, where I did my Ph.D., to a conference dinner. I've been invited with others to a restaurant that is managed by a friend of Fahad Ansar in central London. And when I was sitting there, it was like sitting in a Hamas hub in London. And it was like no one is doing anything. And it also feels like that there is no understanding to the fact that this threat is not a threat on only or merely on the Israeli and Jewish society, but rather a threat on the British, the European societies as a whole. Because if a student would decide to throw a bomb or to do something like happened in October 7th, it wouldn't hurt only me or my community.
Well, on that note, it seems like the UK is getting set to receive quite a large number of refugees from the conflict in Gaza. How do you think that is going to affect the climate on campuses and across universities in the UK?
When last time I met the Palestinian refugees was because I worked on research of refugees for many years. I did my PhD on the Palestinian refugees. I interviewed refugees here in the UK. And I think now there are many refugees that are coming, already are here and arriving from Gaza. And the climate at the university, it's going to be very difficult, of course, because they are coming from Gaza and there are problems of radicalization. The most important thing to remember in this context is the refugee and the policy and the inclusion of refugees in the UK society and in other societies in Europe. Because, for example, one of the major problems that there are asylum seekers here in the UK many years ago, it started many years ago, that they receive asylum in the UK because they are posing threat in their countries. But they come here to their host countries and then they pose a threat. And basically, when I interviewed someone who is working in the security services in the past here, he said to me that the major problem is that they are being funded by the government to stay here and to receive asylum, but they are basically terrorists. So how do we tackle this? And the government is trying basically to maneuver between keeping the refugees that are sort of not terrorists, of course, because they have to be cautious and not to tag all of them as terrorists, and to balance this within who is coming and who is not.
In the United States, we have, at least with the new Trump administration, we see that there are now some sort of mechanisms and safeguards, as we've heard in the cases of people like Badr Khan Suri or Mahmoud Khalil, where if they do express support for terrorist groups, or in the case of Badr Khan Suri, have direct links with them, there is criminal action that can be taken, and they're even facing deportation. It doesn't seem like something like that exists in the UK, particularly not under the Starmer government. Is that fair to say?
I agree with you. And there are also links between, for example, Khalil and other activists here in the UK. And you see the support in Khalil in the UK. And you see just recently there were reports in the US about Khalil's allegedly supports October 7th. But here in the UK, there are links between activists that support Khalil, and what they're saying is related to what I talked about earlier. It's called the Right to Education campaign. They're saying that because Khalil is a scholar, he studies at Columbia University and, is part of sort of the academic community, therefore there is a need to defend him. And so it's basically defending terrorism and no one is saying a word. And I would like also regarding to this, just describe to you the atmosphere on campus when I've worked there. It's not only that they are not deporting them, but there is also a problem when the professors and students that arrive to the UK and the universities have to prioritize who they are recruiting, for example, for professor positions. And I know from inside sources that they would always prioritize not only pro-Palestine, but actually professors that are openly support terrorism. So if you would have a list of candidates that are candidates for one position, professor position in the UK, and you would see who is the majority, you would see that the majority are the radicals.
Well, thank you very much. We've reached the end of our podcast for this week. Before we go, is there somewhere where our viewers and listeners can follow more of your work?
Yes, definitely. Thank you for this, Anif. I mean, you have my contact details, and if someone wants to contact me, I'm here.
Now, as always, I want to thank you all for your viewership and your participation. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Thank you.